who
Love
do
it.
you want to lead? Someone who's
Mm.
berating you, like, or someone who is on your side, right? And I always think of like an example with maybe a boss, right? And it's like my boss came to me and was like, Allison, listen, if you show up late ever, I'm gonna fire you. Right? It's like, okay, fine. Versus if you keep showing up on time and or early, I'm gonna give you a raise. Like, which one sounds more motivating?
Oh, hey guys, welcome to episode number 246 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. Are you mean to yourself? I know that's an odd question to ask, but you know what I'm talking about. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. Can't believe I said that. I like to call them shower moments. You know what I'm talking about, right? They're those moments where we just self attack. It's so common. It is so normal. And if you're ready to kind of let that go, you are going to love today's episode with Allison Guibault. She is an expert at helping women specifically release self doubt and deal with what she calls high functioning anxiety. Sounds familiar, right? Like I talk about high functioning codependence all the time, that we overfunction as women. We do everything for everyone. We do all of the invisible, unpaid work to the tune of $3.6 trillion in the United States, by the way, if they were to actually pay us all back that we don't even notice. And then we continue to do all this work because people say things like, you're so selfless. You're so amazing. You've got it going on. And those accolades keep us locked in that high performance codependence. And Allison has made it her job on planet Earth as both a therapist and a coach to help all of us start to rewire that. Allison is a licensed therapist, international speaker, and confidence empowerment and self worth coach. She specializes in anxiety, trauma, sex, and intimacy. But her true passion is helping women let go of this doubt, this shame, and the limiting beliefs so they can reconnect to their confidence, reclaim their power, and align with their intuition. We covered so much ground in today's episode, and I really want to encourage you to sit down, focus on this conversation, and buckle in because it's that important. All right. One of the things I really want you to pay attention for is her toothbrushing challenge. You'll know what it is when you hear it. All right. Pop in those earphones and let's get to it. Allison, welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast. This is going to be a conversation I have a feeling people are going to come back to a couple times. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being here.
This is going to be so cool. So I'm like jumping out of my chair in case you guys can't see me and you're only listening. I'm jumping out of my chair right now. But Allison, okay, we are talking about self-doubt today. We're talking about high functioning. We're talking about over functioning. These are some of my favorite topics because we know the invisible, unpaid work that women do can make the world turn around. But there's also like what's happening for us internally when that happens and the paid work we're doing as well on top of all that that can just cause so much anxiety. And I know this is really kind of your area of expertise. So I would love to know of all the things on planet Earth that Allison could be doing right now. Why is this what you do?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Why do I do what I do? I'm gonna say something sort of like a little bit cliche, but I believe it and I mean it. It's because it's really important. And I have had enough experiences in my life, both personally and professionally, where I have been particularly with women and have just seen how often, no matter what a lady is doing, right? They're showing up at work, they're showing up at motherhood, maybe they're showing up in both, and their internal dialogue is just trash. And, I think no one becomes a therapist or a healer unless it was kind of a little bit birthed in their own story.
Mm,
So I spent a lot of time, a lot of anxiety when I was a teenager and was a high achiever, overachiever. And I can now kind of look back and be like, wow, that dated back the whole way to childhood. But it really started to show up negatively in my adulthood. And it took me a really long time to recognize that. So I was like really stuck in a corporate career that I was very successful at, but I really, really didn't like.
mhm.
And it wasn't until like seriously my 30s that I had this aha moment where I was just like burnt out, exhausted. I was hustling and I just like, snapped a little bit. And like, luckily I didn't have this like big outward snap, but I like rushed to my therapist's office. And I was like, if I continue this way, I will have no fulfillment in my life, right?
Mm,
Like that I have lost touch with things that really matter internally to me. And I spent the next few years really trying to rework my entire life. And it was really hard. There wasn't a lot of messaging out there that I was connecting to
Mm,
about, things you talk about, like abundance mindset, the ability to change your mind.
yeah.
But I did it. I found a way. And so now, like, why am I here doing what I'm doing now? I would love to shorten the learning curve for other people who are in my boat and just, kind of model that there is a way out and there is a way to like hustle and work hard and keep all of your core qualities that are important to you and also have alignment and also have fulfillment.
Love
So
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want to help other people find it sooner.
Yes, I love that. I love that. It's like, please don't bang your head on this exact
Yes.
same wall I've been banging my head on. Yeah,
Yes.
it's so, I think that is so sort of instinctual, I think, for some of us who want to create businesses. It's really like, how do I shorten the pain curve for other people? And I agree with you. I think sometimes we're given our own life experiences, our own life lessons because it's our thing to teach.
Mm-hmm.
I
I love
say that
that.
all the time. We always
Yeah.
teach that which we need the most. I just had an awesome girls weekend, right? So I was with my girlfriends and one of us is sort of struggling with what to do next. And she said, "How can I not know this?" And I'm
Mm.
in my 50s. And I was like, that was me. Like, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? I'm right here. And obviously I figured this out in my 30s, not my 50s, but it doesn't matter. The journey's the same. And so we had a session together and it was so she's like, "I knew you were good at what you do, but I didn't know this is what you do." Like, oh my God. And it was like so sweet to hear from somebody who's known me for so long. But I think also understanding that all those little, I love how you described your story because all those little moments, all those little like tools that get packed into our backpack through experience are
Mm-hmm.
what allow us to then put that backpack on and lead others like
Oh,
down the
love it.
trail, right? It's
Yes,
so
so
good.
true.
Ah,
Yeah, absolutely.
so I really resonated with something you said, and it's something I deal with a lot, and that is the internal mind chatter, right? I
Mm.
deal with it a lot as a human, right? We all have it. But also with my clients. Like my Voxer is filled up on a daily basis with why am I talking to myself like this? Why does this keep it? It's so normal for us to do this, but I would love to know, given your expertise, given all the people that you've supported in your career, how do we deal with the trash talk that
Mm.
goes on inside? And I know there's lots of platitudes out there. There's lots of memes, love yourself, right?
Yeah.
But on the daily, you know what I
Yes.
mean? When you make a mistake, when you have those
Yeah.
shower moments, you're replaying something in your head. What
Yep.
can we do in those moments, Allison?
Yeah. So, I'm going to give a little bit of like a backstory of how you get those moments, right?
Ooh,
And then we're going to figure out how to redirect them.
okay.
But the truth is we're really impressionable, right? And I get a little feminist here where I used to work with men and I do notice a huge difference between male self-talk and female self-talk. And, I think back to just all of the messaging that we've heard as like little girls. And, even from like, don't speak up out of class. Like, you're going to come off as bossy. Right. And so we like learn to quiet ourselves.
Mm,
Where if, we have like a boy in class, it might be like, wow, what a leader. And so over time, we start to collect all of this narrative, right? Like, just thinking about like the most stereotypical definition of motherhood, right? It's like you just give, your
mm,
kids come first. So if suddenly you're like, wow, I have needs, well, that contradicts the narrative that I've heard of being a good mom or a good business person, right? Like
yeah,
you put in all of your effort, you have to go 90 to 100% commit to it. So,
20%.
it's no huge shock that suddenly when we're in adulthood, we have collected all of these stories
Mm,
that are in our head about what life is supposed to look like.
mhm,
So, when those thoughts come up, something that I like to do, I do this with clients. I'll be like, and this is a little bit deeper than just sort of the basic mindset work, but like, where did this thought come from? Right. And I had a client just recently, I had permission to share this, but she was just thinking like no pain, no gain, like that kind of mentality.
mm.
And I was like, okay, so the first time you heard this, like, where did it pop up? And she was like, oh, I was a horrible coach when I was a kid and played softball. And I was like, okay, so what do we, now you're grown up, you're in your 50s, right? So that little girl who was 10, had this like mantra, no pain, no gain. But with all the life experience you have had under your belt at this point, what do we think about that narrative now? And she's like, I feel like we could maybe bring some compassion into that. I don't actually believe that we need to pain ourselves to success. And it's like, right. So awareness is step number one, right? Like I'm noticing that I have the thought at all. And then I like to kind of like have step one A, which is where did I get this from? But then the next, like the later, more deeper work is really reworking it. Like I am empowered. I am in control of my thoughts. I realize most people, when I say you actually can redirect a thought, that is a tough sell. Most people are like,
Yeah.
no, my thought is just in my head. I can't control it.
That's what it is.
But
Yeah. I
it
mean,
is.
we really go that way. Yeah. I feel you
And,
on that.
and I can appreciate why it feels that way as, again,
Mm,
someone who suffered from anxiety. But the truth is, it just takes practice, right?
yeah.
So shifting our thoughts from something that's really negative to something positive, and it doesn't even have to be positive. We can land on neutral, right? Like I'm just not gonna bully myself today. We don't
Mm.
have to get to the like, oh my God, I'm beautiful and wonderful. But just starting to
Yeah.
exactly that, right? Just starting to quiet all that stuff down.
Mm.
And with every client that I see, like the practical advice, like you can do this in your own life, is I want you to practice saying something nice to yourself each and every day. And when I say that, there is always the eye roll. And it's like, oh my God, so you've built an entire career and you're going to tell me I need a freaking mantra,
Be
right?
nice. Yeah, right. Like just be nice to you. Yeah, I know. Well, it really has. I don't think that's not the truth of the work, right? The truth of
No,
the work is extraordinarily profound.
correct.
It's been like dummied down is that's not the nicest phrase. I'm trying to come up
Absolutely.
with a better one, but it's been like simplified, right? That might be
Yes.
a more gentle word, but it's like been simplified to the point like if it's not on a meme, I can't consume it,
Correct.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
But like the truth is I'm a brain science nerd. Like I have 4 degrees in this, but one of them is
Ah,
on brain science. And like the thing we know about your brain is the more you think something, the easier it is to access that thought and the
mm,
more you start to apply it. So if someone's been telling you you're not good enough as like a kid, or you need to work really hard, or you're always the one that, we didn't have to deal with. You were an old soul, right? All this narrative we get. And now we're grown up and we're like, well, no one has to they don't have to worry about me. So if I share my needs, but they will be worrying about me. And then what does it say about my identity? If
yep.
we start to shift that and it's like just saying something like, I'm allowed to have needs,
Yes.
right? It actually chemically shifts our brain and we'll become more likely to believe that in more generalized areas. So the thing I say is just listen, 30 days, preferably 45, even better if it's 60, but I'll start with 30 days. When you are brushing your teeth, I want you to just practice literally saying anything that isn't negative. I do not need, I am beautiful, I am worthy, like all of those ones that you see written on lipstick on a mirror, but it can just simply be like being mean to myself isn't helpful, right?
Mm, okay.
And
So a neutral, like you're saying, like super
neutral,
neutral.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we're just going to practice it. And whenever I assign this, again, I get that eye roll, I get a lot of resistance, and it's often uncomfortable, right? Like someone
Mm,
who's not used to saying nice things to themselves,
yeah.
even neutral things to themselves, they're in that mind chatter that's really negative. This is going to feel weird and uncomfortable. And I just say, like, fake it till you make it, ride the wave. But I just had a client, I shared this in my newsletter, but she came to me at the end of a session and she's like, oh my God, I stopped faking it. It worked. I can't believe your like
Ah,
weird little stuff. Like I have been doing this now for 4 months. And my
mm,
partner came to me and said something and I like felt my shoulders going high and like I spoke up for my needs. And I think if this was 4 months ago and I hadn't been practicing, I would have felt really small. I would have felt really timid. I really would have worried about their feelings.
mm-hmm.
And now I've just, her mantra was something to the effect of, I give myself permission to express my feelings, right? Again, it doesn't have to be I'm beautiful. So, it's a long way to say I swear this works if you actually put in the work. And in all of these things, spirituality, mindset work, like you can't meet a mindset expert who isn't telling you practicing your narrative is important, right?
Right.
What we believe
Right.
statistically will dictate our behavior. So our thoughts actually really do matter.
Mm,
And the quick example I like to give is, we can see this in sports psychology. But if someone goes up to bat and they're like, I'm going to hit the ball, that's it. Statistically, they are more likely to hit the ball,
I love it.
And so
Yeah.
it's just like, that's it. And whether we're talking about relationships, career changes, how we feel about ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
what you think dictates your emotions about yourself, which is going to power your decisions.
Yep. There's no way around that. I think it's so I want to say underrated how
Hmm.
that's just the path.
Yeah.
Right? What you
Yeah.
think will alter how you feel, which will alter how you act. And I
Absolutely.
always say action is the bridge between the invisible world, our thoughts and beliefs that no one can see, and our
Hmm.
results, which are in the physical
Yeah.
world that we can see, right? So that bridge of action is so
Beautiful.
important, but what we're thinking and believing directly dictates what actions we're going to take, which is going to directly impact our results. And I love that you're
Yeah.
focusing on that because I just don't think we spend enough time noticing.
Right.
Right? It's like if you're going to go in through the tasks of your day and your mindset is, I hate myself.
Yeah.
I never do things right. And that could be because of something you heard when you were little. It could be
Hmm.
something you've just developed. And it doesn't matter what task you're going to do if we're doing it in that mindset.
Hmm.
Yowza. It's
Exactly
really
that.
going to cause a certain set of results, right?
Absolutely.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And I want to up it even like one baby level, which is just like the other thing to kind of practically do is notice how you're feeling. Someone just asked me recently the difference between anxiety and intuition, and I had to like take a beat and really think about,
Ooh,
what is that difference? Because they feel similar, right? It's sort of
they
like
can.
they
Yes.
can, they
Yeah.
can feel really similar. And my answer ultimately ended up being, if you drop into your body, you get all sorts of like clues, right? Whether it's a check
Mm,
engine light or you're navigating to the right path. So if you're having any kind of thought, particularly like let's say you're laying in bed and you're thinking about all the things you have to do, you're worrying about the bake sale, the work email you have to send out, whatever it is, drop into your body. And if your shoulders are light and you're smiling and you feel like all sense of zen, then like, yeah, sure, like continue that line of thinking. Maybe it's helpful in this moment.
mm,
But if your shoulders are up, if your heart is racing, if you're sweating, if you're feeling that like panic start to surge,
mm.
it is a very good indicator that your thoughts are not helpful in this moment, right? And
Okay.
we have a tendency to ruminate over reflect. Reflect gives us a beautiful aha moment. Rumination just drains our energy.
It does. And you know, the other thing about, I want to come back to this, but just the
Mm,
other thing about rumination that I think is so critical, something I'm actually studying right now. So I'm so glad you brought it up, is how much it robs us of the present moment, not just
mm-hmm,
our energy and our joy, but when you're like replaying conversations or going, oh, I should have done, and something amazing is happening in front of you, you miss it.
mm-hmm,
And I
100%.
think it's so important for us to understand, and again, that's not to add shame to it. I don't wanna do that. I wanna help all of us understand the
Mm-hmm.
power
Yeah,
of learning to start to adjust this gently in a different direction. There's so much life that we could be missing
yeah.
because of that. But I really appreciate what you just said about our ability to notice the physiological responses and that what I always love to say, right? The body never lies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So good.
Absolutely.
So good.
Yeah, and it really is true. I just got a facial and a massage this week. It was wonderful.
Yes.
But as I was laying there, I was thinking it was a powerful reminder to me of how far I've come
Mm,
because I used to get massages as my self-care. And I don't think that self-care is that deep, just to be clear, but it is nice, right? It feels nice. But I would spend the hour to 90 minutes just in my head. I would not be paying attention to anything that was happening. And I was spending money and time to go have this like really release, right? And meanwhile, I was just constantly thinking of all the things I had to do. And over the course of the last few years, even like using a massage as an example,
mm,
I would notice like when my mind would start to drift. And like the beautiful part is you can bring it back, right? And especially with something that's physical, like just listen to the Zen music, right? Like feel her hand rubbing my arm right now, like
mm.
bring it back. And with enough of that practice, I actually just enjoyed a massage the other day and I wasn't rattling off all the to-dos I have to do.
So it is so that is that high functioning piece, right? But isn't
Yeah.
that so ingrained in us to be like, okay, second I'm off the table, I got to do the
Yeah.
dishes, I got to get the thing, I got to do
Yep.
the meal plan, I got to get the thing. Oh, I didn't
Yep.
answer that client. I got to, it's
100%.
so challenging to continue to be like, no.
Yes.
One tab open at a time, people. Come back in.
I
It's kind of that
exactly.
feeling, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
so good. So as you're working with people,
Mm.
Allison, what is the experience like for most people? Because I know I'm a huge advocate. I always tell everyone you should always have a coach and you should always be in therapy. And they're like,
Yes.
the little self-serving Sarah. I'm like, you don't have to choose me, but have a coach. I always have a coach and a therapist because there's so much that our emotions are telling us
Yeah.
all the time. And if we don't understand what they're saying, because
Yes.
hi, we're taught math before we're taught to understand, anger means there's been a boundary violation,
Yeah.
right? It's like, we should know that. It's kind
Yeah.
of helpful as you go through life. So if somebody comes to you and they're like, all right, what is that experience like for most people? I'd love to know.
I mean, first of all, I just want to echo what you said. Yes to therapy and yes to coaching. I'm also a coach and a therapist. You do not have to use me, but I have my own therapist and a team of coaches. And I actually
Smart
do
woman.
believe that like synthesis of, and for me, how I both receive and practice therapy is almost a little more past reflective.
Mhm.
And I'm like kind of digging in deep to my childhood and like understanding where those wounds came, understanding my triggers, and coaching really for me often is like forward movement. So, when I have someone who comes to me, I think it depends on whether they're coming for coaching or therapy. But honestly, even if it's either one, it's someone who has at least, we've gotten to step one, right? There's an awareness, especially with therapy. No one comes to therapy when they're feeling excellent, right? Like we
Right.
make that first call when things are off center, right?
Mhm.
And that's okay. That's perfectly okay. But usually there's a lot of fear, right? So the thing about healing is just so powerful, and personal growth is incredible, and change is, transformative. But we can't get to any of those steps without some discomfort,
Mm.
right? Some fear. A lot of the times healing means letting things go, which can be really difficult for people,
Mhm.
whether it's old patterns or a relationship. For me, it meant all of the above plus a career change, right?
Yeah.
A location change. So, what I try to do, you use the word gentle, and I think it's a really important word. I would add in compassion
Mm.
when you are going first to therapy and or coaching. And even if you're not doing that, you're just having that aha moment of things don't feel right, and I'm ready to kind of face what is no longer working for me, where I feel stuck, where I feel hurt. That is a really radical thing to do. Most people don't seek that kind of
Mm.
insight. They don't seek that kind of reflection.
Mm.
So it's just bringing a lot of gentleness and compassion. And like most people in their times of struggle need at least a metaphoric hug, if not a literal one, right? Like we've felt wounded. And so to take those steps, we need to re-secure our safety. We need to feel supported because we don't usually do that work like blindly and alone.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I, I,
someone
I wa-
coming. Yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry. No,
Sorry.
please.
We're both so excited to talk
I'm
about
so
this. I can
excited.
tell. No, I mean, what I was going to say is I think it's almost impossible to do alone,
Yeah,
right? I mean, because we can't see our own stuff.
I
For
can't
real.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to have somebody on the journey who is giving metaphorical hugs, right? It's like, it's so critical because I'm thinking of your first client that you talked about today who was like, no pain, no gain. I
Mhm.
think we've heard that for so long as we've been, born into this white male ruling world that we live in, right? It's
Yep.
that, that's what works. You're
Hmm.
sad, suck it up. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, that kind of energy coming at us. And so when someone's alone or feeling sad or feeling like, why can't I do this work? Or what is wrong with me? Right. That's something I hear. So what's wrong with me? Why am I not? I'm like, nothing.
Nothing.
Right. Nothing. And
Yeah.
that we think sometimes we can bully ourselves. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the right word to use. We can bully ourselves or beat
Yeah.
ourselves up into performing at a certain level that some esoteric strategy, like ideal that got put in place when we were little. That's how we
Yeah.
perform at that level is if we beat the hell out of ourselves internally.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
like, here's the truth. Like, yes, you could theoretically beat yourself into progress.
Mm.
It would be painful. We'd be missing the point, and it's not particularly motivating, right? So you would level to only a certain level, but the truth is, positive reinforcement actually is an enormous catalyst for change. And like that is based in research. That's just not like my one woman, one opinion, right? And like,
Yeah.
like I always think of my dog. I'm like, I had a really naughty dog. She was very troublesome. Like, yeah, I could have hurt her, and maybe she would have like been submissive and changed her behavior. That would be awful for her and awful for me. But instead, I really worked with trainers, and we got her to understand things, and we gave her lots of treats and love, right? And
Hmm.
so when she did good things, we rewarded her rather than
Right.
punishing her for the bad. And now she's an entirely different dog, right? She's amazing and wonderful, and I love the hell out of her. And so, your mind is the same thing. Like
Mm.
beating it up only gets you so far. And I have not had a personal experience or a professional experience where I've seen guilt, shame, doubt, pressure work, right? Like
Right.
that isn't the success story. If you're looking at your mentor and they're sharing their epic journey of transformation and success, the chances are like you're not listening to a motivational speaker talk about how they berated themselves,
That's right.
right?
That's
It's like you're
exactly right.
finding support, you're leaning into your own strengths, you're looking at failing as learning, right? Like, okay, I didn't get it right. What do I need to do next? And like this is actually the energy that shifts and pivots our life. And like whether it's you're trying to start an Etsy shop or you're leaving a partner or you're just trying to run a marathon, right? It doesn't really matter what the goal is. This is the energy that we bring plus the action steps,
Of
right? You got to
course.
take the steps.
Right.
And that's what shifts us. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no meditating and $1 million falls on your head. That's not how that works. Yeah. So I always tell people, no actions required. Even lotteries, buying the
Mm,
ticket, that whole funny story, right? So one thing I just really want to underscore what you
mm,
just said. I think it's so important. One, you don't let me forget. I want to talk about unstable leaders because I think there's
mm.
something important there in what you just said. I say this a lot to my clients, or we talk about it inside the Abundance
Mm,
Academy. I'll be like, listen, human behavior is never altered through shame.
mhm,
It's only ever altered through love. But that
mhm.
includes us in our self-talk. That's not just like what we say to other people or children or even neighbors or colleagues or our
Yeah,
staff, whatever. That is never going to work long
yeah,
term. It might create like a frenetic immediate response. I'm sorry, mom. I'm sorry. Right. That kind of a, yeah, I'll send more emails, boss. Like that kind of a thing. But it's never going to create a lasting change that you would want to see in a fellow human.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then the
Absolutely.
other thing that sort of it occurred for me, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this, and this is not meant to be a political statement, though. Heaven knows we could take it there. But just that when you were talking about your dog, I think this is so critical. Is that am I correct in saying that the human species is the only
Mm.
species that will follow an unstable leader? And that the key to
Ooh.
working with animals, right? With our dogs, with even horses, I know that's why people use, horses so much in therapy, is they won't respond when you're not telling the truth. And
You
that
know,
dogs know that you're not stable when you're screaming and yelling. So they're like, no. And I think it's so important for us
yeah,
to sort of observe. There's so much we can learn from animals, right? I think because we're,
yeah.
that same nature, but just this idea that if we could start to find that in ourselves,
Mhm,
say, no, my spidey senses are telling me that's not the truth. I'm not going to
mhm.
respond to that.
I
It's
love
just
it.
so powerful, right? Oh,
Yeah.
spark that in my brain, Allison.
Um,
Way to go.
first of all, I love Spidey Sense. I actually use that as well. I've never heard anybody
Okay.
else use it. But yeah, as you were saying that, I just had this like little image pop into my brain. But when we were training my dog to just like get on her leash and go outside, I was working with a trainer, right? So we're like, I'm working with a trainer to train my dog. And she had said like something to the effect of the dog needs to see control and like learn control. So like literally hold your head high and like shoulders back, walk through and like look confident. And yeah, if we like take this as a metaphor for how we treat ourselves and others, one, I definitely think, yes, like find the internal leader. Who
Love
do
it.
you want to lead? Someone who's
Mm,
berating you, like, or someone who is on your side, right? And I always think of like an example with maybe a boss, right? And it's like my boss came to me and was like, Allison, listen, if you show up late ever, I'm gonna fire you. Right? It's like, okay, fine. Versus if you keep showing up on time and or early, I'm gonna give you a raise. Like, which one sounds more motivating?
oh,
Right?
I am so in there early. Like you're not
I'm
even
in
you're gonna
there
there's like
early.
Sarah scented wind every morning as I run in to be early. Like, oh my God, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So, we do look for stability, and that is, you know, one of my mantras to myself is very often my anxiety lies because it does, right?
Yes.
It's constantly telling me mistruths. But yeah, it is symptomatic of being unstable, right? And I think, yeah, if we adopt that own philosophy and think about if I'm leading myself and I like almost personify it, what does that internal what do I need? Right. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you probably need gentle love. You got this. Right. Like, one of my mantras to myself is I can do tough things. Right.
I love that.
Like, I
I love
can.
that.
I've done it before. I'll do it again. That doesn't mean I'll like it, but I have
Mhm.
gotten from point A to point B through the dark tunnel before, and I'll do it again because life does, even the most healed, enlightened, hippy dippy manifesty person is gonna have some dark times, right? Like that is just
I
the truth of the
yeah.
human life.
Welcome to
So
humanity.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
it's yeah, we're all in this one together. Yeah.
Yep.
I love when people are like, "How do you know what I'm thinking?" I'm like, "'Cause I think it
Yep.
too." Yeah, I
Humans.
mean, that's what we're all on the same page there because we're human. But I'm
Yeah.
really loving this conversation, and I love where you're taking this
Mm.
as far as our own. I think we're going to come up with a phrase together, Allison, and it's all about
Yes,
it, like
ready.
a stable internal leader.
Yeah. Oh, I
Right? We
love
don't
it.
wanna see that manifested out there,
Mhm.
and how can we really talk to ourselves in a way that leads things forward and has us feel inspired, even when it's hard,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes, but
It's
I would
really
even say
tough.
especially when it's hard,
Yeah,
right? Like,
well,
we need
right,
it
'cause
even
yeah.
more.
Yeah, because it's so easy to be great when it's easy. I love
Yeah.
that phrase because it's so true.
Yeah.
And one of the mantras I just wanted to add for myself, I'm having to make some kind of large life decisions at the moment, and I think one of the mantras I've picked up is I can trust myself, and I teach self-trust a lot, but then it
Mhm.
comes to making such big decisions, it's almost like that moment to sort of look back and say, "I can trust myself to do this. Look at all the decisions that we've made so far," and I just felt like I know there's so many women who
Yeah.
through time, energy, societal messages, personal relationships, whatever it is, have received the message,
Yeah.
you really can't make that
Mhm.
decision, right? Like
Yeah.
that, just like that little insinuation sometimes I think
Yeah.
that we're really up against when it comes to clearing out self-doubt.
Totally. And
Yeah.
it's sometimes even a little sneakier than just like you can't do it. Like when I work with clients, I often find like they're like, no, I know I can do it. That's fine. But then it just like finds a new brand, right? So it'll come in as like, but you're too old, right? Like,
Ah.
but what are people gonna think? But you
Mhm.
have to be responsible, right? So, again, we want to like sort of blanket that I can do it, but starting to notice sort of the nuanced brand in which your personal anxiety is like shoving it at you so that you
Ah.
could
Yes. Yes.
so you could then override it, right? And
So
for
good.
me, like one is that what used to be like you're too old is just like time passes anyway, right? Like what am
I
I
love
too
that.
old for, right?
Right.
I left my corporate job in my 30s. I went back to school in my mid 30s. I took an unpaid internship in my late 30s,
I love it.
opened several businesses in my 40s. And I'm like looking forward to what the heck I'm going to do in my 50s. Like,
Let's
bring it
go.
on,
Yeah.
world. I got
Yeah, I
things to
know.
do.
Oh, so good. So good. It's
Yeah.
true. And old according to whom and to what
Yeah.
standard? And I go through that a lot. I have a couple of girlfriends who are in the beauty industry and they're really trying to break it, right? This anti-aging idea, all that stuff is like, according to whom?
Hmm.
Whose standard? And why are we
Exactly.
playing to other people's standards? What is happening here? And I
Yeah.
think it's kind of again, it's a different flavor of what you and I are talking about as we're talking about this internal
Yeah.
dialogue, but how much of the external dialogue have we picked up as like the truth? It's
Hmm.
according to what?
Yeah.
And learning to ask that question, like age according there's
To
just
who?
I never got that,
No.
right? I never got that. And I love the meme that's been going around and when J-Lo was in the Super Bowl 4 years ago, I can't even believe that, but whatever,
Oh.
where they showed a picture of the Golden Girls, and this is what the 50s look like in the 80s, and then she's, like, on a pole and, like, hot as hell, it's like, "And what the 50s look like now," right? It's just so great, but I think we really have started to break through this
Yeah.
idea that any of that is real, whether it's what we wanna work on, how we wanna
Mm.
be treated, how we wanna show up, our internal stable leader, all these things that we can turn to that we kind of get to design on our own,
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah.
good.
I love
Oh,
internal
Allison,
stability.
thank you so much for this
Thank
conversation
you.
today. I have a feeling we've pushed a couple of people in a direction like, oh, I can be nice to myself and be successful. This is awesome. It's so good. I'm really, really excited. But I know you have a newsletter that you offer. I'd love to
I
share
do.
with our listeners.
Yeah, so I have a few projects that are in the works where I, kind of echo a lot of this, right? How to take your mindset and move forward, how to feel that confidence, that empowerment, that radical love. So I have a podcast called Becoming Unstoppable on all the places you find the pods. And I have a website, which is a notefromyourtherapist.com, where I
Oh
do have a
my.
weekly newsletter. And I do often, sometimes, I don't say often, I run free workshops. So I do try to make, I love coaching and I love therapy. And if you can invest in yourself, that is the quickest way to transformation, full
Mm,
stop. But I also like to, throw out some ways that we can access this information without having to, if you're not ready to quite take that leap into that investment. So check it
so
out.
good.
Yeah.
So good. I love it. Allison, thank you so much. And just quickly, where do you like to hang out on socials if people want to find you there?
Yeah, most of my socials, I think I'm a little different on Facebook and I always forget which one that is, but I'm a note from your therapist. So I hang out the most on the gram. I'm on Instagram the most, but yeah, a note from your therapist on like YouTube and TikTok and all that stuff.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Allison, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you're out there in the world doing this work for other humans, for our fellow sisters out there. I just really appreciate you, and I want to acknowledge the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. Same right back to you.